Hey guys, hoping all's well with everyone. So in this video we're going to be continuing our read-along of Wayside School is Falling Down by Louis Sachar. And last time we finished, we completed chapter 8, so we'll be starting with chapter 9 today. And hope you guys are enjoying the read so far, and let's jump into it. Chapter 9, Mush. Warning: do not read this story right after eating. In fact, don't read it right before eating either. In fact, just to be safe, don't read this story if you're ever planning to eat again. You have been warned. Miss Mush wiped her hands on her apron. She smiled at the children who were lined up at the cafeteria. It warmed her heart to see how much they liked her food. Mauricia was first in line. "And what would you like today, Mauricia?" Miss Mush asked. She knew the name of every child in Wayside School. Mauricia looked at the sign. "Special today, mushroom surprise." "Just milk," said Mauricia. "I brought my lunch." Miss Mush smiled and gave Mauricia a carton of milk. Joy was next in line. "And what would you like, Joy?" asked Miss Mush. "Milk," said Joy. Miss Mush smiled and gave Joy a carton of milk. "And what would you like, Jason?" "Milk, please," said Jason. "Just milk," said Damien. "Milk," said DJ. "Milk," said Leslie. It was almost Ron's turn. He hadn't brought a lunch. He normally brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to school, but there hadn't been a single slice of bread in his house this morning. "I know," his mother had said. "I'll give you some money and you can buy a nice hot lunch from Miss Mush." She thought it was a brilliant idea. "Can't I just have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the bread?" Ron had asked. Now he looked up at the sign. "Special today, mushroom surprise." He wished he weren't so hungry. This was the 18th day in a row that the special was mushroom surprise. It was called mushroom surprise because it would have been a surprise if everybody had ordered it. No one ever did, except Louis, of course. That's why they'd had it for 18 days. There was always plenty left over. "Milk," said Terrence. "Milk," said Sherry. "Milk," said Calvin. "Milk, please," said Bibi. "And what would you like today, Ron?" asked Miss Mush. Ron took a breath. "Mushroom surprise," he squeaked. Tears of joy filled Mrs. Mush's eyes. She blew her nose on her apron and then said, "One mushroom surprise coming right up." Tears came to Ron's eyes too, but for a different reason. He looked at the mushroom surprise. It was sort of green. So was Ron. Miss Mush proudly dumped a hot lump of mushroom surprise on a paper plate and handed it to Ron. He put it on his tray, then pushed it over to the cash register, where he paid for it. The news quickly spread around the cafeteria, then up and down the stairs and out the playground. "Ron ordered the mushroom surprise! Ron ordered the mushroom surprise!" Mrs. Jules was sitting in the teacher's lounge on the 12th floor when Bibi burst into the room. All the teachers were shocked to see her. "Bibi, you're not allowed in here," said Mrs. Jules. "This is a secret place." "Ron ordered the mushroom surprise!" Bibi shouted. Then she ran back up to the cafeteria. As Ron sat down at the table, 87 kids crowded around him to watch him eat. "I wonder what the surprise is," said Dee Dee. She had the best view. She was pushed right up alongside Ron's chair. "Maybe it tastes good," said Leslie. "Maybe that's the surprise." "No, I think it's called mushroom surprise because after you eat it, it's a surprise if you don't die," said Mac. "Louis eats it. He's not dead," said Jason. "Louis has been eating Mrs. Mush's food for long, so he's immune to it," said Allison. Ron dug his plastic fork into the goop. He raised it to his mouth. Dana covered her eyes. "I can't watch," she exclaimed. Ron opened his mouth wide. The fork entered. He brought the fork out again. It was empty. Ron chewed twice, then swallowed. "He ate it!" Dee Dee announced for those who couldn't see. Stefan screamed. Said Ron. "Not too bad. It sort of tastes like a mixture of bananas and spinach." "What's the surprise?" asked Dee Dee. Ron looked at Dee Dee. His face flushed and his eyes changed color. His whole body began to shake, like a washing machine on a spin cycle. Dee Dee was afraid he was going to throw up. She tried to get away, but with everyone crowded around, there was no room for her to move. But Ron didn't throw up. He stood up, put his arms around Dee Dee's neck, and kissed her smack on the lips. He sat back down. His eyes returned to their normal color. "Yeah!" said Dee Dee, wiping her mouth on her sleeve. "What's the matter?" asked Ron. "Don't you know what you just did?" asked Allison. He shrugged. "I ate some mushroom surprise. It wasn't bad. Sort of like a mixture of hot dog and grape jelly. I wonder what the surprise is." He dug his plastic fork into the goop. Everybody ran away. When Mrs. Jules entered the cafeteria, no one was there except for Ron. He was sitting alone at a table eating mushroom surprise. Mrs. Jules sat down next to him. "Hi, Ron," she said. "So how does it taste? And what's the surprise?" Ron swallowed another mouthful. He looked at his teacher. His face flushed and his eyes changed color. Chapter 10. Music. Benjamin still hadn't told anybody he wasn't Mark Miller. His grades had never been better. Mark Miller is a lot smarter than Benjamin Nushmutt, he thought. When they chose up teams for kickball, he was always the first one picked. Mark Miller is a better kicker than Benjamin Nushmutt, he realized. The girls in the class liked him too. Mark Miller is better looking than Benjamin Nushmutt, he decided. But unfortunately, he knew he had to tell Mrs. Jules his real name. He sighed, then slowly raised his hand. Mrs. Jules gave him a tambourine. He had been so busy thinking about his problem, he hadn't noticed that Mrs. Jules was passing out musical instruments. She had just asked, "Who would like the tambourine?" So when he raised his hand, she gave it to him. "Who would like the triangle?" asked Mrs. Jules. Joe raised his hand, and Mrs. Jules gave it to him. Why is it called a triangle?" asked Joe. "I don't know," said Mrs. Jules. "Maybe because it's shaped like a triangle?" suggested John. "No, that can't be it," said Mrs. Jules. "Then the tambourine would have been to be called a circle." "Maybe it was invented by a person named Joe Triangle," said Rondi. "That's probably it," said Mrs. Jules. She held up the next instrument. It was a glockenspiel. "Who would like the glockenspiel?" she asked. Sherry raised her hand. Nobody asked why it was called the glockenspiel. It was obvious. Mrs. Jules gave the bells to Stefan. "Why are they called bells?" he asked. Nobody knew. Joy got the bongo drums. Todd got the bass drum. Jenny snared the snare drum, and Leslie got the kettle drum. When they banged on them, it hurt everybody else's eardrums. Mrs. Jules gave one cymbal to Calvin and the other cymbal to BB. DJ got the gong. The three Erics got kazoos. Mrs. Jules shouted, "Uno, dos, tres, cuatro." The children all played their instruments. They shook, rattled, rocked, and rolled. Joy bonged her bongos. DJ gonged his gong. Sherry glockened her glockenspiel. Stefan jingled his bells. Calvin and BB slapped their cymbals together, and Joe's triangle went ding. But something didn't sound right. "What's wrong, Mark?" Mrs. Jules shouted over the music. "Why aren't you playing the tambourine?" "My name's not Mark," said Benjamin. "It's Benjamin Nushmutt. I'm sorry for not telling you before." "What?" asked Mrs. Jules. I can't hear you. My name isn't Mark, he said. It's Benjamin. Louder, said Mrs. Jules. So everyone played louder. Todd bashed his bass drum, Leslie cooked on her kettle drum, Calvin and Bibi crashed their cymbals together, and Joe's triangle went ding. My name is Benjamin, shouted Benjamin. Mrs. Jules put her hand to hear. Louder, she said. So everyone played louder. DJ kabonged his gong. Joy congoed her bongos. Paul splacked his castanets. Jenny spaghettied her snare drum. Calvin and Bibi whammered their cymbals. And Joe's triangle went ding. My name's Benjamin Nushmutt, hollered Benjamin Nushmutt. Louder, yelled Mrs. Jules. So everyone played louder. The three Erics screamed into their kazoos. Calvin and Bibi ran to opposite sides of the room with their cymbals, then charged toward each other. Suddenly, the door flew open and a man entered. Benjamin had never seen him before. The whole class became very quiet. It was Mr. Kidswater, the principal. Calvin and Bibi screeched to a halt just in time. Their cymbals were less than an inch apart. Is something the matter, Mr. Kidswater? Asked Mrs. Jules. Several teachers have complained about your music, said Mr. Kidswater. The students are having trouble hearing. I understand, said Mrs. Jules. Good, said Mr. Kidswater. He walked out of the room. Okay, you heard Mr. Kidswater, said Mrs. Jules. We'll have to play louder so everyone can hear. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. They shook, rattled, rocked, and rolled. Benjamin frampled his tambourine. Excellent, Mark, shouted Mrs. Jules. He smiled. He had never played so well before. Mark Miller is a better musician than Benjamin Nushmutt, he thought. Chapter 11. Kathy and DJ. Down on the playground, Kathy was singing her favorite song. Wayside School is falling down, falling down, falling down. Wayside School is falling down, my fair lady. Kids go splat as they hit the ground, hit the ground, hit the ground. Kids go splat as they hit the ground, my fair lady. DJ was walking across the playground with his head down. Hi, Dr. Jolly, said Louis. Louis called DJ Dr. Jolly because he was always smiling. But now DJ's smile was upside down. He looked up at Louis. Louis had never seen such a sad face. What's wrong? He asked. DJ just shook his head, then looked back down at the ground and sadly walked away. Louis felt like crying. Hey, Louis, what's wrong with DJ? Asked Ron. He's so sad, said Dee Dee. I don't know, said Louis, shaking his head. Hey, you guys want to play kickball? No thanks, said Dee Dee. I can't have fun when DJ is unhappy. Me neither, said Ron. Across the playground, all the children quit their games when they saw DJ. Nobody could have fun when DJ looked so sad, except Kathy. She sang, broken bones and blood and gore, blood and gore, blood and gore, broken bones and blood and gore, my fair lady. We don't have no school no more, school no more, school no more. We don't have no school no more, my fair lady. The bell rang. DJ sadly looked up at the school and sighed. Hey, Deej, snap out of it, said Myron. DJ stared through his friend. You want to walk upstairs with us, Dojo? Asked Damien. DJ shook his head. I need to be alone, he mumbled. Damien and Myron looked at each other, then started up the stairs, leaving their sad friend behind. DJ headed on up, but stopped halfway between the ninth and 10th floors and sat down. He lowered his face into his hands and cried. A moment later, someone burst out laughing. DJ opened his eyes and saw Kathy standing over him. "You shouldn't sit on the stairs, dumb jerk," said Kathy with glee. "I almost kicked you in the head." Kathy always called DJ dumb jerk. She didn't like DJ because he was always smiling. Now she was glad to see him so sad. "Hi, Kathy," said DJ. She plopped down on the stair next to him. "What happened?" she asked. "Did your dog die?" She laughed. DJ shook his head. "Are your parents getting divorced?" she asked hopefully. "Did your house burn down?" "No," said DJ. "My great-grandfather gave me a gold watch. It was over 100 years old. I brought it to school today and—" "You lost it?" Kathy exclaimed with delight. DJ sadly nodded. Kathy laughed. "Oh boy, are you going to get into trouble." She rubbed her hands together. "Your parents will ground you forever." "No, my parents never punish me," said DJ. "They know I learn from my mistakes." "Oh," said Kathy, a little disappointed. "But your great-grandfather will hate you," she said, "and he'll never give you another present for the rest of your life. Not even for your birthday." "No, he loves me no matter what I do," said DJ. "He likes people, not things." Again, Kathy was disappointed. "But the watch was worth a lot of money," she tried, "and you'll have to pay for it out of your allowance." She laughed triumphantly. Sure she had gotten him this time. "I don't get an allowance," said DJ. "I don't like money." Kathy frowned. Still, she knew there had to be some reason why he was sad about losing the watch. "You'll never know what time it is," she squawked. "So?" asked DJ. "Time isn't real." Kathy didn't know what DJ meant by that, but she didn't care. "Well, if you don't know what time it is," she told him, "you'll miss all your favorite television shows." "I don't have a favorite television show," said DJ. "I never watch television." He thought a moment. "I'm not sure if we have a TV in our house or not. Maybe there's one in the closet somewhere." Kathy glared at him. "Well, then how come you're so sad you lost that dumb watch?" she demanded. "I'm afraid a bird might think it's food and choke on it," said DJ. "Is that all?" shrieked Kathy. DJ smiled. "I guess you're right," he said. "A bird probably wouldn't choke. In fact, maybe it could use it to make a nest." "I hope so. Don't you?" He hopped to his feet. "Thanks for talking to me, Kathy. I feel a lot better now. You're a good friend." He hurried up to Mrs. Jewell's room, taking the stairs 2 and 3 at a time. As DJ's smile turned up, Kathy's smile turned down. She followed up after him, grumbling to herself, "He doesn't like money. He doesn't worry about time. He never watches television. Why is he always so happy?" Everyone in Mrs. Jewell's class cheered when they saw DJ entering the room smiling. Kathy walked in behind him, frowning. Mrs. Jewell was getting ready to show a movie. She gave DJ a piece of black construction paper. "Hey, look!" exclaimed Myron. "Oddly found a watch." Oddly, the bird dropped the watch on the windowsill. Kathy couldn't believe it. "It's DJ's!" she griped. Myron gave the watch to DJ. "Here, you can have it, Kathy," said DJ with a big smile. "It's worth a lot of money, and this way you won't miss any of your favorite television shows." Kathy took the watch from him and put it around her wrist. "It'll probably make my skin turn green," she groused. Mrs. Jewell started the movie projector. Stefan turned off the lights. Damien pulled down the shades. DJ held a piece of black construction paper under his nose because his smile was so bright. Chapter 12. Pencils. Jason borrowed a pencil from Allison. When he gave it back to her, it was full of teeth marks. Allison held the pencil by its point. "Yuck," she said. "You chewed on it." Jason felt awful. It is very embarrassing to borrow somebody's pencil and chew on it. Sorry, he said. I didn't do it on purpose. You can keep it, said Allison. She dropped the pencil on Jason's desk, then raised her hand. Mrs. Jules, can I go to the bathroom? I have to wash my hands. Jason slobbered all over my pencil. Everybody laughed. Jason turned red. I'm sorry, Allison, he said. I know it's a disgusting habit. I just can't help it. Don't let Jason touch any of my books, said Allison as she headed out of the room. He might eat them. Everybody laughed again. Here, you can eat my book, Jason, said Todd. I don't like it anyway. Mrs. Jules made Todd write his name under the blackboard under the word discipline. Jason was so mad at himself, he broke the chewed-up pencil to bits. That wasn't a smart thing to do. Everybody took out a pencil and a piece of paper. Everybody take out a pencil and a piece of paper, said Mrs. Jules. It's time for our spelling test. Jason slapped himself on the forehead. I'm so stupid, he thought. Rondi, may I borrow a pencil, please? He asked. Rondi made a face. All my pencils are new, she said. How do I know you won't eat it? I won't, said Jason. I promise. You better not, said Rondi. She gave him one of her pencils. It was new and freshly sharpened. Jason liked the way it smelled. The first word is orchestra, said Mrs. Jules. Jason tried to remember how to spell orchestra. He stuck the back of the pencil in his mouth. Second word, garbanzo. Jason chewed on the eraser. When the spelling test was over, Rondi's pencil was worse than Allison's. Jason looked at it in horror. He didn't even remember chewing it. Oh no, he thought. What am I going to do? He stuck it inside his desk. Jason, may I have my pencil back, please? Asked Rondi. What pencil? Asked Jason. The one I lent you, said Rondi. Jason opened his desk and pretended to look for it. I don't know where it is, he said. Mrs. Jules, Jason stole my pencil, called Rondi. Jason, give Rondi back her pencil, said Mrs. Jules. He gave it to her. You chewed on it, exclaimed Rondi. Everyone laughed. No, I didn't, said Jason. Those are your teeth marks. How can they be my teeth marks? Asked Rondi. She smiled. She was missing her 2 front teeth. So, said Jason, you don't chew pencils with your front teeth. You chew them with your back teeth. How do you know? Asked Rondi. Said Jason. Mrs. Jules made Jason write his name on the board under the word discipline because he chewed Rondi's pencil, then lied about it. And try not to eat the chalk, she said. Everyone laughed. Rondi threw the chewed-up pencil out the window. It hit Louis on the head. Mrs. Jules gave Damien a stack of worksheets and asked him to pass them out. They contained arithmetic problems. Jason had to borrow another pencil. Allison, may I borrow another pencil, please? He asked. Eat my socks, said Allison. That wasn't such a bad idea, Jason realized. If he stuffed a sock in his mouth, he wouldn't be able to chew a pencil. Myron looked at his worksheet. I don't feel like doing this stuff, he said. Here, Jason, you can have my pencil. Thanks, Myron, said Jason. I promise not to chew it. He hoped he'd be able to keep his promise. He thought about asking Mrs. Jules for a Tootsie Roll Pop. If I'm sucking on that, I won't chew Myron's pencil. And a Tootsie Roll Pop would probably taste better than Allison's socks. He didn't know for sure because he had never tasted Allison's socks. But before he could ask Mrs. Jules called him. Jason, will you come here for a moment? She said. I don't think I know how to keep you from chewing pencils. Jason smiled as he walked to her desk. I like the purple ones, he told her. But Mrs. Jules didn't give him a Tootsie Roll Pop. Instead, she taped his mouth shut with heavy-duty masking tape. She had to use a lot of tape because Jason had the second biggest mouth in the class. "There," she said. Jason started back to his seat. "Aren't you going to say thank you?" asked Mrs. Jules. "Mm-hmm," said Jason. "You are welcome," said Mrs. Jules. "Hey, Jason," teased Allison. "You look like a mummy." "Don't sneeze," said Rondi. "You'll blow your head off." They both laughed. Mm-hmm. Jason said back to them, "It was a very bad thing to say. He wasn't supposed to use words like that." "You better not pull the tape off," said Rondi. "You might rip off your lips." They both laughed again. Jason had never been more embarrassed in his whole life. His ears burned as he set to work on the arithmetic problems. They were tough problems. Several times the pencil crashed against the tape, but the tape held firm. Mrs. Jules was very proud of herself. Not only did the tape protect Myron's pencil, but Mrs. Jules also noticed that Jason was quieter than he'd ever been. "I should tape all their mouths shut," she thought. "Then they'd all be so nice and quiet." It was such a good idea, she wondered why no other teacher had ever thought of it. And I'll stop the video there, ending chapter 12. But I hope you guys enjoyed the read aloud today, and I hope to see you guys next time in our continuation of Wayside School is Falling Down. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, please take good care and be safe. Bye.